There is great value in traveling a few miles on your own feet, taking in the subtle, oft-overlooked details not seen from a car. But too much of this, and you lose sight of the bigger picture. Sometimes you have to traverse vast distances to remember just how many different landscapes, ecosystems, cultures, and experiences make up this world. And with Thomas moving back to the Midwest, there was no better time for us to take a road trip across the U.S. And what better place to start the trip than in California, the nation's most culturally and biologically diverse state. In the first of 3 special episodes, we're taking you across California to the coasts, mountains, and deserts. Sit back and get ready to join us on the beginning of our adventure. Our journey started here, at a motel in Paso Robles, about an hour and a half out from Big Sur.
We woke up early in the morning and got ready for the start of a backpacking trip.
After we were packed up, we headed out and made our way towards the coast.
We entered Camp Roberts, an old National Guard post that led to the Santa Lucia Mountains, and eventually Big Sur.
The hills were lush with vibrant green grass, a far cry from the arid hills of Southern California.
All around us, the sky was overcast, which gave us a bit of trepidation about our backpacking trip.
Still, the scenery around us was beautiful, with rock formations, open meadows, lakes, and wildlife.
Finally, we crested the Santa Lucia Mountains and drove back down the western side of the range.
As we drove, we caught a glimpse of the distant blue void that was the Pacific Ocean. We had made it to the coast. We were at Big Sur.
We arrived at our trailhead, a small pull-off along Highway 1, and sorted our gear out. Then we started out on the trail, through the verdant hillsides.
To our left, we could see the coast. Everywhere we stepped, life was flourishing. A floral fragrance filled the air around us, thanks to the many shrubs and herbs that surrounded us. Some of them were new to us, others more familiar. The edible Indian paintbrush, medicinal rib leaf plantain, and of course, wood sorrels.
Flowers sprouted from the ground, tangled vines hung from the tree limbs, and ornate grasses swayed in the wind.
Everywhere we looked, there was a richness of life.
We climbed higher into the foggy mountains, but behind us, we could still make out the ocean coast.
Everything about this landscape felt primordial or prehistoric. The dramatic hills, the rugged coastline, and the occasional patch of towering pines.
This branch is so weird. It's like the pine cone just started taking over the branch or something. Like in a video game when something gets textured wrong.
It looks like some sort of a primitive tree that you'd see like a fossil of, just embedded in rock or something.
We continued hiking, continually in awe at all the wildflowers and vegetation around us.
As we gained elevation, a thick fog started rolling over us, and rain drizzled down from above.
Now we were hiking among the clouds.
The quiet ambience and the mysterious haze evoked familiar imagery of distant lands.
I was thinking this, in a weird way, it reminds me of Japan. The fogginess and the open hills.
Yeah, it does seem like very Asian, so to speak, like the Asian mountains like in China and stuff.
Yeah, and the mist, the rocky like faces of the hills.
I think we are like smack dab in the middle of a giant cloud.
Yeah. The ocean is right out there, but it just kind of disappears into a void.
Yeah,
It's amazing that it's just tiny little rain droplets.
that's preventing us from being able to see.
Yeah. Because on a sunny day, that'd be like clear, crisp
Yeah.
blue.
It's funny, you can actually tell the difference between like Lake Michigan and the ocean. The ocean is just so vastly bigger.
Yeah, somehow.
Doesn't seem possible, but it is.
The rain continued pouring down as we hiked higher and higher into the clouds.
And we were still surrounded on all sides by vegetation. So something that's always interesting to me is that if you learn botany in any region, if you go to another region, you won't be able to know what species something is, but you can tell what family it is. So for example, with this, just because I can see that the flowers are irregular and I can see how the leaves are growing, the pattern that they're growing in, I know that this is in the pea or legume family. So then there's also these trumpet-shaped flowers. We've been seeing this growing everywhere. It's growing on a vine and it's got these sort of heart-shaped leaves, big open flower, and it really resembles morning glory. And again, I don't know what species it is, but just because I can see the similarities, I can tell that it's related to that. One bad thing about weather like this, if you're wearing glasses, is you can't see anything, which is a shame because it's really beautiful everywhere I look.
We came to a gully in the mountain, where the environment changed completely.
Coniferous trees towered above, their limbs covered in lichen, and plants resembling those found in the temperate rainforest grew everywhere.
We emerged from the gully back to the exposed surfaces of the hill.
Here, the clouds created a blank void, and some desert plants grew nearby.
So as I was hiking, I noticed some yucca growing out from the slope. These big brown stalks with seeds, and I think that's the only thing that's keeping me a little bit grounded because we're going on this trail and all below there's just clouds and you can't really even tell how high up we are. It just feels like we're really in some completely otherworldly, heavenly realm. And just like there's these big, jagged rocks out there, it's super surreal.
Thomas looks like a ghost in the distance.
Yeah. This is nuts. just cut the audio. The strange rocks, the colorful wildflowers, the ancient gnarled trees. It really felt like we had traveled to a higher plane of existence.
But even if it felt like our spirits had transcended, we still had our mortal need for food, and Andrew found some edible plants.
So, I'm looking and there's some spring grains popping up that you can eat. This one is called miner's lettuce, which is a really distinctive plant because it's perfoliate, which means that its stem or stalk goes directly through the leaf. So basically it's surrounded on all sides by the leaf. And this is a spring edible that you can just eat raw. It's related to spring beauty out in the east. And nearby we've also got this Gallium aperine, which is a pot herb that you can cook in a pan. And it's better when it's tender, but it's really good. It's like got sort of a interesting rough texture because it's actually got little barbs on it that will stick to your clothes if you throw it at somebody. But yeah, both really cool signs of spring.
Man, it's literally like stepping into a painting.
It's so surreal. It's especially like a painting because I've got splatters on my lenses.
That's just crazy. Like, it looks like that's like the old man's hut, and then that's where his sheep roam over there, and then that's where he had an accident over there, broke his leg.
At any minute, I could see like a dragon flying through the air.
Oh yeah,
and just
yeah.
not even be surprised. I'll be a little surprised. Traveling through the wilderness like this, it's not hard to see how various cultures developed intricate mythologies and legends.
If you're looking for an otherworldly experience, the mountains are a great place to find one.
We hiked onto an open ridge and found a previous hiker's camp.
Not sure if this is a legit campsite, but it's definitely a fire ring right here. And they were kind enough to leave some firewood that is definitely completely soaked and unusable. But I'm sure at one time it was dry firewood that would be excellent for this amazing view.
You could walk all the way down that ridge. Well, not all the way, but you know what I mean. It's just so clear. We continued on, hiking onto another gully full of flora. Amid bird calls, a Douglas iris grew, adding a flash of color to the green plants and maidenhair ferns around it. It's so fascinating, this environment. Earlier we're out on the hills where there's desert flora. You know, you see some of the bayonets from the yucca plants. Now we're just in this mossy, ferny, rainforesty area, and it just seems to be these crevices in the hills where these big, tall redwoods are growing and all this lush greenery. California in many places is a dry and arid state, but we are definitely not experiencing the dry or the arid.
We had built up an appetite and found another, more secluded campsite just off the trail, where we decided to stop for lunch.
Looks like we found something.
A little bit. Lush spot.
Well, this is like a half of a respite. It's like, it's nice to find this open area, but
At least we get to sit.
yeah.
The problem with sitting underneath big trees like this is, even though it doesn't rain as much, when it rains, it's the clunky.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all the
Funky
stuff
raindrops.
falling from the branches. I got more of this vegan jerky from when we climbed Whitney. That's how old it is, right?
Yeah. It's so good though.
Oh yeah. You know me, I have no standards.
It's actually not that bad. I wouldn't call it jerky by any means.
but more of a meaty chunk.
Oh yeah.
Peanut butter.
Butter snap pretzels. Can't beat them. Actually, yeah, you can. Hot, soft, salty pretzels are the best.
As we ate, we debated whether or not to keep hiking to our intended campsite or to stop and stay here for the night.
So I think we're deciding that we want to stay here because the rain's picking up. There's not really any advantage to hike like maybe 2.5 more miles to our intended campsite. And I feel like if the weather's good tomorrow, we can just make it to tomorrow night's site. Like we don't have to change the plan, it's just it'll be easier to hike in good weather.
Yeah, I agree.
We set up in the rain, struggling to cover our tents before they got too soaked on the inside.
And after we were done setting up,
Right now I'm thinking, like, what do we do? It's like you get in the tent and just stay in the tent for the rest of the day, or you just stand here hoping that the sun comes up.
I'm just standing here doing nothing. I'm like, I don't want to get my wet stuff in the tent. I don't really want to move.
The way we feel is kind of summed up by this bread in the Ziploc bag. Where it's like, you desperately hope that the bread isn't getting soggy.
Okay, I know what we should do. We should cook up some hot water. Hot water, you can go far with some hot water.
We should cook up some.
We got cup noodle.
We should heat up some desiccation packets and rub them over ourselves.
Don't tell me that's not working.
It is not working. I have another propane tank though.
Oh my god.
We look like Power Rangers.
We waited for the water to boil, standing silently in the rain.
Now don't spill that. That's our only hope.
Lord knows the soil doesn't need any more water.
And then we'll drink the hot water. That's too hot to drink right now, but it feels good. We got some warm air.
Ambient warmth.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. Put that under your chin. Put your face over it. Yeah. Yeah. Use the brim of your hat to catch all the heat waves.
Oh, actually, that is quite nice, though.
You try to drink it.
My turn. Oh yeah, it's like a sauna. It's like, yeah, it's catching in the hood. It's like who else wants the
It
warmth?
feels like the inside of my coat right now.
Precious
All
warmth.
steamy and hot.
How is it?
It's bland but warm. Just the way I don't like it.
Yep, that's hot water.
Professional Asian. Oh, I was gonna feed it to you.
Please, sir, may I have another?
No, mine.
No, let me feed it to you.
I don't trust your chopstick skill.
That's fair.
Cuidado, caliente.
Why are you blowing on it? I need all the warmth I can get.
I mean, it does help to have warm food right now.
A small sip, just a small one. Don't want you guys to think I'm hogging it all.
Rain never seems as big of a nuisance when you're like prepping for a trip. And the minute you're like hiking and it's raining, you're just like, God, this is the worst.
No, I'm telling you, after our Smokies trip, rain and civilization doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah.
If you've got a space to stand in and be dry, it's
yeah. It is literally nothing.
After our light meal, we retreated to our tents to avoid the rain, just for a little while.
So earlier I was saying, you know, we're wet, but at least it's not freezing cold out. But I'm quickly realizing that I would actually almost prefer it to be cold. Because then when it's cold, you don't really mind how claustrophobic and cramped everything is. But now it's just humid and cramped and awful.
Yeah, when it's cold, you want it to be a little cramped. You want to be warming each other up. But when everything's just moist and wet, you just don't want to touch anything.
I feel like we're inside of a tauntaun or something. It's just like Everything's wet, sticky, and kind of gross. But at least we're warm.
The true Star Wars experience.
How are you guys doing over there?
We're managing.
You're managing? Yeah, we're barely fitting too. Robbie's got one leg over mine. My food is outside the tent. We're not doing too well. Which one do you want?
So this tent, I think, most of the time has only been used by Robbie to sleep in alone. And we're starting to see why.
I've got the extra wide or the wide sleeping mat, so it's taking up 80% of the space. And Andrew doesn't have a sleeping mat, so he's kind of crammed to one side.
Okay, so we've got bread here. Thomas has the tuna. And we're gonna make some tuna sandwiches. Really cramped over here.
Really cramped. Oh, this is really a struggle.
Are you actually cramped in there?
Yeah, we're super cramped.
That's bull. My tent's the exact same size, so I know exactly what kind of space you're working with.
Yeah, I don't believe you at all.
Now I know why Robbie was so quick to volunteer to not be in his own tent.
We've got some prosciutto over here, and I don't think we're gonna let them have any tomorrow.
What's prosciutto without a space to eat it in?
I feel like meat on a charcuterie platter.
Eat it.
This is yours.
Oh, thank you.
Bon appetit.
I just imagine them lying next to each other like this and putting grapes into each other's mouths.
Just lying on the softest cushions.
Just the whole tent just sprawling with pillows.
All the extra space they have is filled with silver platters overflowing with food and wine. I just hear them laughing too little.
I just constantly hear Robbie going.
Laughing like two little weevils over there.
Has your tent always been like this? Have you never figured out why it's bagged in like this?
No, you gotta use little guidelines and an extra stake, but I just don't do it usually because it's not worth it.
Oh. I see. It's not worth it because I don't have to be.
Delectable.
They're the only ones who can eat sustenance. Mmm. Mmm.
You're only fooling yourself.
Well, I couldn't eat another bite.
So we've probably been in this tent way too long. We've been in this tent probably 17 hours now.
Everything is soaked beyond all recognition. The rain has not abated even a little bit.
I brought my jacket in to dry, but the rainfly doesn't cover this part of the tent, and the material's so thin that my jacket is completely soaked, as is everything else within a 8-inch margin around the tent. And the tent's only about 16 inches wide, so
It's I've never experienced rain like this before, where it just continues and continues and continues.
Oh, my nuts are wet too.
I have absolutely no desire to leave the tent still.
The rain has just gotten harder. There's definitely water droplets falling in here and there.
All this clothes hung to dry, still soaked, not even a little bit dry.
Look at this condensation. Just water everywhere.
Just hope that it ends soon, because it's getting ridiculous.
I don't want to go back to sleep.
Eventually, we had to call it. We couldn't keep going on this backpacking trip. We were soaked, our gear was soaked, our cameras were soaked. It was an untenable situation.
No, it's impossible. Okay. This not feasible. I think the batteries are all wet too, so I don't even know if they work.
I'm at the point where I'm
you know, I don't care anymore. Let's just keep filming. And when Robbie tells me, no, we can't keep filming, there's a limitation here.
That's all I need to know. Pool of water, dirt mound, soaked. We're in a cloud. It's over. I'm calling it. It's over. You know, it's actually not raining that hard outside.
Oi, oi, oi.
We are like smack dab in the middle of a cloud right now.
The rain never really abated, but we got up anyway, and immediately Andrew saw some wild edibles on the trail.
There's some wild strawberries here, and I think these might actually be the tasty kind because they're got white flowers. It's a little like maybe underripe, but. Anyone else want one?
Yeah, probably a little bit not ripe yet.
Was yours a little less ripe than mine?
I think so.
Very seedy. Like a very ripe strawberry, but very good.
Yeah, definitely more so than anywhere else we've been. This feels like a rainforest.
It very well may be a rainforest.
Yeah, no, I mean, look at this.
It's just north of here.
We got like these fronds and stuff.
We hiked back out into the open hills, and today the fog was just as mystical as yesterday.
I've been known to be hyperbolic, but this is magical. Like, this is absolutely magical right now.
This feels like we're walking to another realm. Like, you just can't see what's beyond.
This is so cool, dude.
Look at how quiet it is, too.
Wow. This is it, guys. This is the afterlife. The moment we've been waiting for. Sweet relief. Release from this prison of wetness.
But of course, this wasn't quite the end just yet. In fact, our journey was just beginning.
We hiked into densely forested gullies and back out into the open, hazy hillsides, where grasses grew and rocky cliffs loomed above.
It was a shame that we had to cut our trip short.
But we were soon filled with hope when we came upon an amazing ocean view.
Yeah, this place is beautiful, no doubt. A little wet. Suddenly really warm, but beautiful.
Whoa. There's all that blue that we didn't see the other day.
Yeah.
Today, the sky had cleared a bit, and now we could see a deep, rich blue of the ocean from the trail.
Before long, we were back at the trailhead, heading out on the road.
Oh, look, we can just sit right here, too.
Yeah, that's perfect.
We stopped by a little store by the sea where we bought some beer. It was an abrupt ending to our backpacking trip. But this wasn't so bad.
To the road trip.
To the road trip.
Start off on this coast, end up on the other one.
And now, let us dine on fancy meats and cheeses. We were hoping to eat this fancy charcuterie meal while backpacking, but admittedly, the ocean coast made it even more enjoyable.
Molto bene.
I love charcuterie, or antipasta, or whatever you want to call it. So good. And none of this requires refrigeration before opening, so it would have been perfect for the trail. Any moment in life spent eating fancy meats, cheeses, stuffed grape leaves, and drinking beer on the ocean coast with the wind in your hair. Can't get much better than that. We might have felt a twinge of disappointment at not completing the backpacking trip, but sometimes it's better to enjoy the here and now than worry about what could have been.
And so, we headed back south to Los Angeles, where we would stay one last night at my place before beginning the road trip.
Dry, sunny, civilized. It was a far cry from the past couple of days.
Brian, I'm going to give this to you because you're going to the other car.
Inside Thomas's apartment, we got everything packed up. Our gear, Thomas's things, and we tested out our walkie-talkies.
And so, the road trip begins, and you and I are stuck in the car together yet again. I guess our fates are intertwined whether or not we want it.
Hey, at least we both smell a lot better.
So we've got two cars. Me and Brian are taking the SUV. Thomas and Andrew are taking the other car. First stop, eating.
I want to say a big thank you, goodbye to my two roommates, Zach and Dakota. Honestly, the two of you have been the best roommates I've ever had, and I've had nothing but fantastic roommates my whole life. I'm gonna miss you guys so much. You guys have been so important to me. You've helped me grow as a person. I really feel like I'm leaving two brothers behind, and now I'm stuck with the.
Now you're stuck with the
smelly,
the hooligan cousins.
The hooligan cousins who have no respect for me. To be fair, you had no respect for me either.
You know what's pretty great is you don't even have to experience LA traffic on the way out.
I always find that the saddest days are always the sunniest.
I'm happy. But at least we're not stuck in rush hour.
No. Yeah. That's for sure.
I'm curious how much traffic we're going to run into on the road trip as a whole, because obviously Los Angeles is like some of the worst in the country, but we shall see.
This might look like bad traffic, but for LA, it's actually pretty smooth.
This is Ringus and Bingus. Come in, Tingus and Angus. Looks like we've lost communication already.
We continued driving to the burger joint, and Andrew and Thomas came through the radio.
Angus and Tingus, we're here.
Okay, we are at the burger place.
Okay, I think we see it up ahead. We're gonna be there momentarily.
We stopped for a tasty bite. I got a burger with pineapple and deep-fried green beans. Big Kahuna burger. It's got pineapple in it.
Well, that's that Hawaiian burger.
And then we headed back on the road.
This is Niner 912. Dingus and Tingus, are you reading me?
Yes.
Okay, so
We'll just regroup in Lone Pine.
Yep.
Elevation, I put that on your phone.
Next stop, Lone Pine.
Now, the journey was truly beginning. We headed northeast to Lone Pine, the town where we had stayed at prior to climbing Mount Whitney the previous year.
Cappy! From the consulate, right? Thomas, that's a nice beard you got there. Looks like you haven't shaved in a little while.
Yeah, it looks good. I like that shape too.
Your bumper looks a little messed up though. What happened to your bumper?
We soon passed by the open desert, filled with funky-looking Joshua trees. And we drove past some barren, brown mountains.
we drove past some wind farms, we approached a town that Thomas was familiar with.
So this is actually Mojave. One of the things I really like about Mojave is that there's this Denny's right there. And every time I go on an adventure this way towards the Sierras, towards Death Valley, I'd always stop at that Denny's because I always knew that that place was the beginning of an adventure.
It's so cool. It's just like a random small town, and it's like
nothing. Now there's
so meaningful.
Nothing.
Yeah. Okay, so me, Robbie, and Thomas have all been through here on the way to Whitney. But Brian, I think this might be your first time really driving through the desert. What do you think?
It's funny because the one thing I really liken this to is Grand Theft Auto 5, because I know it was based off it. Me and Robbie were just talking about like how dynamic the landscape is in this area and how much it can change suddenly. Like felt like we were going through mountains, and now we're just suddenly in the desert. We were just driving through this small little area in Mojave, and it just made me think, like, who in their right mind would want to come out here and live here? Like, it's beautiful to drive through, but man, living out here must be one of the harshest things in the world.
No, it's funny because it's like
Such a small town, it seems like so insignificant. But Thomas was just talking about how he thinks of this town as like this portal to adventure in the desert, because he always stops here for food.
I think it's kind of funny that like we haven't run into any town that's sort of like the touristy town that you usually see.
Well, that's kind of like Lone Pine, which is where we're going. I mean, there's not a whole lot of hiking here, because look around you. I mean, I can look for miles and miles and miles without seeing anything. But Lone Pine, that's a little bit of a touristy place. I kind of call it like a dirtbag version of Jackson Hole.
A dirtbag version of Jackson Hole sounds like our type of place, I think.
Look how desolate that is. I can just see for miles and miles and miles, and there's just nothing between me and there. It's like you're in the middle of the ocean, kind of, but it's land, but nothing here.
We drove further north and decided to make a stop at Red Rock Canyon State Park, a beautiful place where I had gone camping with my roommate Dakota.
We pulled in and were greeted by the surreal, cathedral-esque rocky walls.
The forces of nature had shaped the red rocks into bizarre shapes with unsettling textures, especially for someone with trypophobia like me.
The rain and then like sand blowing onto it like just kind of reforms it in a certain way.
Probably has this.
Yeah, that's borderline.
Almost looks like tree bark.
What is it made out of?
It's gotta be sandstone.
I think it's like just dirt.
It's always astounding to me just how many natural treasures you can find within a few hours of each other here in California. Lush coastal hills, tall granite cliffs, and vast arid deserts with towering red rocks.
It's amazing to think of how all these landscapes coexist and interact. The Sierras block rain from the ocean, creating a desert on the eastern side, while the western side is home to the fertile San Joaquin Valley. With that, we were off again to Lone Pine.
Well, I think our car name should definitely be Rogue One.
That makes sense. Yeah, it's called a road. I think, can I be the Interceptor?
Oh, I kind of like that. Yeah, like Darth Vader's TIE Interceptor.
Yeah, actually, Darth Vader's was a TIE Advance. Generic offshoot of the regular TIE fighter. Yeah.
We must consult the beam probe. We continued driving, passing a sign pointing to the Kern River Valley, where we had gone whitewater rafting the previous year.
Here, the landscape seemed a tad bit greener. We passed by more rocky mountains and hills, and old dusty pit stops.
And as we passed Owens Lake to our right, we saw the majestic eastern Sierras to our left.
So this is Brian's first time in this area, But for us, it's actually kind of nostalgic right now looking at it. You're like, oh yeah. Because when we first came in here, we were looking at it and we're like, oh man, we're gonna have to climb that tomorrow.
I was pretty thankful I didn't have to climb any mountains anytime soon. But as we passed through the rustic town, I could see why so many people were drawn here.
And to your left, you'll see Mount Whitney.
It was definitely good to be back.
Well, Brian, welcome to Lone Pine.
Welcome, Lone Pine. No, I'm excited.
We stopped in one of the local gear stores, Elevation, to reminisce a bit.
We have some more Alpine Air.
Just don't get the burrito bowls.
Yeah, don't get the burrito bowls.
Everything else is fine.
Huh?
I was just saying the burrito bowls were...
Oh yeah, no, stay away from those Alpine Airs.
Amazingly, Matt, the same person we had talked to before climbing Mount Whitney, was back at the store after taking some time off, and he suggested a restaurant for dinner tonight, the Merry-Go-Round.
A quaint Chinese restaurant, this place had both Western American and distinctly Chinese decor. And the interior was laid out in a big circle, like the name implied.
We were just at Elevation, and Matt was telling us that the best place to eat is Merry-Go-Round. We pass this place like every time.
I've been here 8 times and I've never come here.
And we were like, man, we should probably eat here. It's like a Chinese restaurant in Mount Whitney. We're kind of Chinese. Like,
Not me.
It's funny because you come out to the American West, and this is not the typical food you think of, but it's actually totally appropriate because Chinese food came about when, Chinese immigrants came over, built the Transcontinental Railroad, which runs through the Sierras, and that's really where American Chinese cuisine came from. So in a sense, this is the most appropriate sort of food you could be eating out west.
Now, to give the food a taste.
Yeah, no, you can tell it's like homemade. It's really good.
I think that might be sriracha sauce, actually, but it's good.
The broccoli is fantastic.
It's great to have like real vegetables in a meal.
Yeah, the vegetables are so fresh. That's what I was gonna say. This is like the freshest food we've had since we got to California, by far.
And along with some tasty food, the service was overwhelming too. The owner of the restaurant kept bringing us more and more, making sure we were well fed and happy.
Kung Pao chicken gets a lot of flack for being like an American Chinese food. When I lived in China, I had Kung Pao chicken more than anything else.
Even if it is American Chinese food, that's so appropriate for this place.
Yeah.
No,
I mean, this tastes just like when I was in China, when I'd have Gong Bao Jiding, it tastes just like that.
And then we were given some amazing green tea ice cream.
Wow, even the ice cream tastes homemade. I mean, I don't know if it is, but it definitely doesn't taste like your typical store-bought ice cream.
Wait. I don't know what you're I'm feeding you, you feed me. This is our romantic date. It's too late. No, it's too late. You had your chance. Oh man, it's sweet and delicious and creamy and smooth. This is what dreams are made of, people.
I've had green tea ice cream. I've never had it like this before.
It's so good with the strawberry too. It's like, that's like the softest consistency I've ever had.
Typically, like you eat the strawberry, and the strawberry would be like super sour, overpowered.
Yeah, no, this is perfect.
They're all new cookies. You can take both.
Oh, thank you. You guys are so awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think this is already a pretty good sign that the road trip's gonna go well. But let's open this fortune cookie, and if it's not a good one, we'll just open somebody else's. Soon, you will receive pleasant news. I think this is good. It's a good start.
Ah, I can be trusted to keep a secret. Isn't that right, Thomas?
Are you keeping secrets from us, Thomas?
Absolutely. You are always welcome in any gathering. That was appropriate this morning.
Good to have you here at times.
I didn't get a fortune cookie. After dinner, we made our way to the Alabama hills, recessed beneath the shadow of Mount Whitney.
Although we were on the southern end of the Sierras, after our meal, we thought about the history that happened further north in the mountain range.
It was Chinese laborers in the 19th century who first introduced America to Chinese cuisine when they weren't toiling away on the railroads. Yet, despite the cultural and economic contributions of these workers, a growing fear developed of Chinese people. They were often a scapegoat, used to explain other workers' declining wages, and they often faced violence from those outside of their communities. And in 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act was passed, barring Chinese immigrants from entering the U.S. It wasn't repealed until the 1940s.
When you're in the wild, surrounded by solitude, it's easy to feel detached from history and how it repeats itself today.
But we've always seen the wilderness as a place to reflect on society and our place in it. And we see the history of people and society as intricately intertwined with the land and our relationship to it.
That's why we get out into nature, not just to enjoy the feeling it gives us, but to imagine a world where everybody feels as free as we do in the wild.
Dusk turned to night, and Mount Whitney became a silhouette against a lavender sky.
And with the night, I wanted to start a fire, though the tools and the wood we had were of questionable quality.
Not exactly sure what caliber of axe we're working with, this wood also looks like it might be tough to split, so I'm just gonna kind of baton it. Yeah, this is not heavy. I had a feeling it'd be this piney wood that's impossible to split. This hatchet is also not super sharp.
The dullness of the hatchet and the tight-grained wood made splitting these logs a two-man job.
It's almost acting like a maul, where it's not the sharpness, it's just the blunt force. There we go.
Despite the hard work, it was oddly satisfying to split the wood.
Dust and sand rose into the air as we continued chopping the wood. Eventually, we got it down to some more manageable pieces.
After we had some kindling, it was time to split the wood into finer pieces for tinder.
As Andrew worked at the fire, the stars came out by the thousands, and we lied in peace and serenity beneath the night sky.
I never did get that fire going, though.
So all these stars kind of puts it in perspective. That doesn't matter that we didn't get a fire. Am I right? Am I right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that somebody sold us damp wood.
Andrew's like, I'm gonna kill him.
No, guys, this is the first night of a long journey.
Yes, it is.
Journey across the whole country.
Yeah. It's a good start. Really good start.
This was something I was going to miss dearly about California. Vast, open deserts, towering mountains, and alpine forests. And some of the most incredible displays of stars I'd ever seen. As the Milky Way drifted above us, we closed our eyes and fell asleep.
From the east, the first light of dawn illuminated Whitney in an orange glow.
We watched as dawn turned into morning.
As we looked at the mountain peaks around us, we were filled with both a sense of peace and a wistful sentimentality.
I'd spent so many days out here, hiking in these mountains and exploring the towns, but now it was time to say goodbye to the Sierras.
We packed up our things and headed out.
We had just camped beneath the highest point in the contiguous U.S. Now, it was time to go to the lowest.
We left the Alabama hills and headed east, across the sprawling deserts, to one of the most forsaken places on Earth.
We approached the Father Crowley Overlook at Rainbow Canyon.
There, we saw fighter jets screaming through the canyon. We descended into the mountains and went down into the scorching hot Panamint Valley.
Okay, so we were on top of that mountain here. Now we're actually in the valley itself. I'm looking at the thermometer, and there's actually a 10 degrees difference. It was 70 degrees up there, and now it's 80 degrees down here.
So last time we were here, it was over 100 near Mount Whitney. So out here in Death Valley, what type of temperatures was it?
Oh, easily in the teens, 115 or so.
And so is this Death Valley itself right here? Is this the lowest point that we're coming to right now?
Oh no, we're still at 2,000 feet above sea level. We're gonna go about 200 feet below sea level. So we have to go up that mountain up there, which is probably gonna be over 5,000 feet. And then we have to go down another 5,000 feet to the lowest point in the US.
The mountains that we're looking at now are what we saw from way high up on Whitney, like that mountain range way in the distance, right?
I think so, yes.
So this is where the sun rises, basically.
For all intents and purposes, yeah, I think. But if you look ahead, that's a big mountain that we have to go straight up.
Now, we again ascend another set of mountains, and at the top, the temperature dropped to a breezy 64 degrees Fahrenheit.
Then, we made our way down into Death Valley. As we drove along it, the temperature rose to 87 degrees.
The incredibly low elevation causes air to be heated by pressure. As the hot air rises, it becomes trapped by the surrounding mountains and circulates back down to the valley, where it is heated even more, like a giant convection oven.
And now, like a couple of rotisserie chickens, we were roasting in that oven.
Death Valley. It's glaringly obvious where it gets its name. But for such a hot and foreboding place, there's a surprising amount of variety.
Our first stop here was the Mesquite Dunes. Sparsely growing creosote bushes popped out of the waves of sand that surrounded us as we trudged through the heat. It almost looks like a two-dimensional painting with just like layers of paper stacked on each other or something. It's hot. But it's also really funny how this is just so random. It's like someone just dumped a pile of sand here. One thing that's actually really cool about this is there's no trail, so you can just walk in any direction as far as you want on the sand dunes.
Walking across these dunes gave you a sense of freedom, a taste of the sort of rugged, lawless lifestyle made legendary in tales of the Old West.
But if any outlaws hid out here, they'd have a tougher time surviving than this desert iguana.
Amid the sand dunes were patches of dry, cracked dirt, and we occasionally found the tracks of a lizard. Now we drove on through the Devil's Cornfield.
We came across some out-of-place palm trees located near the visitor center. It was only springtime, and already it was 96 degrees.
Then we drove past the fake oasis before coming to a halt on the road.
So one of the problems with Death Valley is the roads are constantly flooding. And so we actually just saw some trucks going by, probably to help with the excavation process of something going on here.
We waited in our cars as construction vehicles and equipment patched the road up for about half an hour.
And then we arrived at the Devil's Golf Course, though we had a feeling that the real Devil's Golf Course was somewhere in the fake oasis we had passed earlier.
Jagged formations of halite salt were scattered across the ground for miles.
The salt gave this part of the valley an otherworldly look. You could walk around and explore here, but you don't want to trip and fall.
And now we were headed to the Artist's Palette, an area full of surprisingly colorful rocks. Here, the hills had subtle reds, purples, and blues all swirled together in the geology.
And finally, we arrived at Death Valley's most famous landmark, Badwater Basin.
Well, here we are, the lowest place in North America. What do you guys think?
The first thing I thought of when I saw this stuff, it looks like Oreo filling.
Well, I was walking along the browner parts of it, and it felt like chocolate ice cream or slushy snow to me. And it kind of looked like the dirty snow when you plow it in a parking lot. And even the tiny bits of salt look like ice crystals, and it's like this weird cosmic joke, because it looks like snow and it's 96 degrees out.
Yeah, stay hydrated. They don't call this Death Valley for no reason.
The basin was stunningly beautiful, but the heat was scorching and we had to keep moving.
And so, we made our way back to the car.
Now, it was time to leave California for good and continue on to the next part of our road trip.
The world is a very diverse place. No place makes this more apparent than California. We took you to the coast, the mountains, and the desert. But California is also rich in culture, with people whose ancestors came from all across the world. Europeans, Asians, Africans, Latinx, all together in this one state.
As Americans, we have the privilege of experiencing aspects from all of these different cultures, and a responsibility to remember that everybody has a complex story that we can't begin to understand until we at least sit down and talk with them.
Our journey had taken us out of the wild and into Las Vegas.
As we overlooked the city, we wondered, where would it take us next?
We were trying to decide how we were going to end this just now, and we were thinking we should have done like looking at the camera saying, and the trip is only just beginning.
He's like,
no, what'd he say?
We have the narration be like, it felt like the end of the trip, and have someone turn to the camera and be like, but it was only the beginning.
Special shout out to Sunjan Huang, Jacob Milliken, and Joe Fender. You guys make this possible.
Also, shout outs to Jason Bourgeois, Keith Trice, Expedition Research LLC, Trails We Hike, Jonathan Mulberry, Charlie Joe, Dennis Yo, and Haley Arcalis.
And special shout out to Tucker and Cooper, aka Tuck and Coop. The Flamingo. So does every hotel in Las Vegas have a casino?
I don't know. This is my first time in Vegas. Like, this is such a new experience.
I feel like they've got it, because if the hotel here doesn't have a casino, then they're not
Yeah,
going to
yeah, yeah.
The gas station had a casino.
Yeah. No, I was saying each hotel is probably a microcosm of everything you can do in the whole city.
Yeah. Ed Racento would like to give a shout out to his daughter, Sophia.
Shout outs to Hong Long, Greg Cribb, and Jim Potts. Thank you so much.
James Pruitt would like to give a shout out to his son Gage, Lisa, and Logan, and also a shout out to us for keeping the adventure alive and inspiring people to go experience the outdoors. John Truitt would like to give a shout out to his friends Dan and Lori Gallagher. Philip and Jessica Lee would like to give a shout out to the Escanos of Colorado Springs. Angelina, Ethan, Isaac, and Oscar, happy birthday to Oscar. Cheers, here's to integrity. Ann McBride would like to give a shout out to her friend Gabriela Cardenas. And finally, T. Bryce Ryan would like to remind everybody to keep on sharing and caring. Boy, you've got the shinning. Don't you mean the shining? Great boy, you want to get sued? Seven, we're right next to each other.
Perfect. Lucky.
Ooh, it's nice.
Hey! Let him in.
Oh, yeah. Wow, dude, look how big our room is now. Yeah, what's our view look like?
Not great. I thought I paid for the better view, but that's all right.
This is great. What are you talking about? Look at that pool.
Yeah, but we don't...
Is that our pool?
Yeah.
I don't even like swimming.
What? This is awesome. That was what you expect, mountains. We're in Vegas. Get with the program.
I expected a view of the topless pool. I don't know about you guys.
Here's what we got. We got Warren Fernandez.
Can I say shout out to my brother? Hi, Ken.
Yes. One of the longest.
One of
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Yeah. Hello.
Thomas?
Yeah.
Thomas! Thomas!